Please welcome MinnPost's political analysts Eric Black and Cindy Brucato as they hash out last week's election. We'll give them 10 minutes to pull each other's hair sufficiently, and then if they hadn't explained everything, they'll take your questions. Eric and Cindy.
Thank you all for reading and supporting MinnPost. I'm having a ball doing it, and I hope some of you are enjoying what we do. So Cindy's going to give a few off-the-top impressions of what just happened on Tuesday, and then I'm going to disagree with her about everything. And after a couple of rounds of that, we'll throw the floor open for comments and questions. Cindy, what do you got?
All right, first of all, I want to know who tweeted that I was short. I've got the 5-inch Louboutins on tonight. I'm as tall as I'm ever going to get. Thank you, Shayna Alexander. Okay, trivia question. Who is Shayna Alexander? And who was her partner on the original version of that contretemps? James Gilpatrick. Very good. I think they're both dead. My take on what happened here. One, Tom Emmer did a heck of a lot better than he probably should have, or certainly than most people thought he was going to do once they got the campaign in gear, because this was a candidate that was not ready for prime time, and probably had he had 2 years prior, 2 years more experience leading up to that nomination, he might have been able to do it. 2, I don't think Marty Seifert would have done it. 3, I was surprised as anyone by the takeover of the House and the Senate. That one, although I knew there were good candidates out there, from everything I observed, all of those candidates, including the incumbents, were not treating this like an election that it was theirs to win. As a matter of fact, they were, even in safe districts, they were treating it like it was theirs to lose. And the DFL, I think, put a pretty good scare into him in the early part of the race. So, final observation here, so we don't take up too much time. I'm not sure that Mark Dayton right now, and total disclosure here, my daughter, this will be a little piece of interesting trivia for you, was Mark Dayton's press secretary. Well, he was U.S. Senator. Darling girl, Brooks Halliday, very talented. Went to work in Mark's office as an intern, and then moved on into the press office. And when Mark decided he wasn't going to run again, and the rest of the staff went scattering, little baby Brooks was there rising to the top. So I know Mark pretty well. I'm not sure he wants this job right now. What he is facing right now is not only is not friendly territory. Where are his allies? What's he going to do once he takes office? If he takes office, assuming he wins, and I think he's going to win the recount. Okay. Take it away.
Shayna, you ignorant slut.
No, you're Sheena. I'm James the, well, call me what you want, but...
Arrogant fit.
Shayna was also short.
And mouthy.
Yeah. I have a Republican source of mine about 2 months before the election said, take me to lunch and I will explain to you how the Republicans have a shot at taking the Senate. And I assumed he couldn't possibly know what he was talking about, and I didn't take him up on the offer. Other than that, I don't think anybody saw that coming. And it is completely scrambled every way we had before of thinking about the 2 years ahead. It is very difficult to even speculate intelligently on how a governor who ran on really one main proposal, which was to raise taxes on the rich, makes a deal with a legislature that's now controlled by people, all of whom ran for no new taxes, and certainly not on the rich. And we're going to have to find that out, and it's worrisome. It actually, if you want to be philosophical for a second, it raises interesting questions about the concept of a mandate. The public, the electorate in an election supposedly tells people what they want them to do. And apparently they want them to raise taxes on the rich and not raise taxes on anyone because that's the lineup they gave. And of course, although it's true that Dayton did not get a majority, if you add the votes of the two gubernatorial candidates who did favor tax increases, it's quite a substantial majority. I'll just get one more thought out there, and then you can call me an ignorant slut. Yeah, just to bring things up to the minute, and Jay Wiener's going to be up later, and he's the guy on the recount. There was a little step of progress made today, but in DFL circles over the last few days, there has been a lot of speculation and worry about the possibility that the Republicans might decide to drag the recount out, file an election contest past Inauguration Day, and create a situation where Governor Pawlenty would have to stay on, as he is required to do under the Constitution, and therefore would be in a position to sign bills from the Republican majority, cutting the Democrats completely out, and of course also getting around the fact that the presumably governor-elect would have vetoed many of those bills. In the last couple of days, I am really hearing no indication from anybody other than maybe Tony Sutton that they're thinking along these lines at all. And now Kurt Zellers and Senator Koch, Amy Koch, the new majority leader, have both said they're not going to do that, and I think that's very smart. It's a kind of a thing that could have blown up in their faces, and it's also just it's just good to let the people who won the election actually govern. So I think that's a good thing, and also, you know, it's important to acknowledge that the recount has to happen. It's an automatic recount with a margin this size, but so far, and I'll be interested to hear what Jay says when it comes up, but there's nothing going on right now that suggests that a margin of that size could be overcome by mistakes that were made on Election Day. Cindy.
All right, getting back to why we voted for this cleavage here. We've got a Democrat that won the governorship and Republicans that took over majorities in the House and Senate. Getting back to the governor, and having worked for a governor, I will tell you this. I think people vote for the devil they know. And that was the case with Mark Dayton. Tom Emmer was the devil they didn't know, and Dayton was the devil they knew. And we put it a little more nicely with Ernie Carlson, although not a whole lot more. But I really think that the electorate didn't know enough about Tom Emmer to make, and what they did know was not good news. I mean, the Alliance for a Better Minnesota was extremely effective in defining this guy out of the gate, and the biggest mistake that campaign did, and I wrote about it, was to not get on right immediately responding to those ads. But he was defined negatively from the beginning, and he was a man that they didn't know. And Mark Dayton, for everything that was all the negative stuff that was thrown up against him from the other side, was not enough. Well, first of all, it was stuff they probably already thought they knew about Mark Dayton. Secondly, I thought it was, I thought it was a little over the line. It's one thing to talk about a man's record when it comes to a drunk driving conviction or a vote. It's another thing to have innuendo and insinuation about someone's mental state. And I think the opposition knew that, but they were going to go there. They were going to go there regardless. I think it could have been done more artfully. But again, in the end, they voted for the devil that they knew, and I think that was it with Mark versus Tom. Questions?
I'll just disparage myself briefly and then throw it open for questions. At least, more than 3 years ago, I happened to have a conversation with Mark Dayton, who wasn't doing that much during that period, and he told me he was planning to run for governor. And I distinctly remember thinking, the poor man doesn't get it. It is way too soon for him to be thinking about offering himself for election again after the way his Senate term ended, and I'm not on board with all of the disparaging things that have been said about his Senate term. Some of them I think are pretty dumb. He didn't have a great term, but this business about the giving yourself an F and closing the office, I always thought were greatly exaggerated. But nonetheless, I felt sorry for him, and assumed that he was going to embarrass himself, and so now I'm just embarrassing myself instead. Would anyone like to ask a question or throw out a comment? There's someone right there.
With the governor being unable to stop weird constitutional amendments, what kind of constitutional amendments can we expect coming from the Senate and the House?
Well, that depends on how much discipline Koch and Zellers decide to impose upon their members of their caucus. And, you know, from what I can see, they're taking some of their members and putting them in pivotal positions, pivotal and powerful positions. And that might be a way of saying, you know what, concentrate on this committee that you're chairing, and let's not go off on these tangents. I think both Zellers and Koch will maintain discipline, because those constitutional amendments tend to be issues that take up a lot of time and lead almost to no positive results.
Well, for those of you that haven't seen the site today, I did have a piece about the constitutional amendment today. And it was basically saying that it seemed quite likely to me that there would at least be a constitutional amendment to define marriage as one man, one woman. That amendment has passed before in the House, and there are important constituency groups to the Republicans for whom it is a very high priority, and I cannot imagine that they would let this opportunity go by. They, meaning those constituency groups. I certainly understand what Cindy said, that the leadership does not want to talk about that right now. They want the message to be, we hear your voice, it's all about stimulating the economy, jobs, we got to balance the budget, let's not get distracted with social issues. But the election in which these constitutional amendments would be on the ballot is 2 years away. And there will be some. The same-sex marriage one, I would predict very strongly. There could be an abortion amendment, and then there are a whole range of initiated acts and constitutional amendments around the country that make it harder to raise taxes. And of course, this wasn't said; it was sort of presumed in the question. The beauty, from the Republicans' point of view, of constitutional amendments is that the governor can't sign or veto them. This is something that a majority of the two legislative houses, if the majority of both houses proposes an amendment, it gets on the ballot. That doesn't mean it gets approved. That's a whole other question. There's a lot of political positioning around amendments. Conservatives will like the idea of these amendments in part because it mobilizes their base, and it gives them another reason to vote.
Next question. Yeah.
It's not usual, excuse my voice, it's not usual for an 18-term congressman to be turned out. The saying is that all politics are local. I just have two questions. One, do you think that Jim Oberstar being defeated was kind of part of the national anti-incumbent movement, or was it very specific issues in the district? And secondly, implications for light rail transit and maybe even high-speed rail, Minneapolis to Chicago. Is that kind of down the drain now?
Want me to go first?
Yeah.
Well, certainly you can't separate it completely from what was happening nationally. This would not have happened in an ordinary year that wasn't a Republican wave election. Long-serving congressmen who are chairmen of important committees that have the ability to bring home that much bacon normally can assume they'll be reelected. It's pretty clear in retrospect that Oberstar assumed it for too long. This was a very late-breaking deal, and Kravac is a very appealing candidate. And it was a year when a lot of Oberstar's assets were two-edged swords because it seemed like he'd been living in Washington too long, was too much a part of the system, and for all that, it was of course extremely close. I think the implications for those kind of projects you're talking about are significant. Certainly, I mean, to the degree that somebody gets light rail in the country, that may go forward, although everything that the government spends money on is going to be scrutinized differently in the first party post Tea Party, the first Congress post Tea Party. But the idea that Minnesota is going to get more than its share of that kind of stuff, that's over.
One word: Malaysia. The man ran an ad that for some reason kept invoking the country of Malaysia, and all I kept thinking of was, what was the name of that movie where the Prime Minister of Malaysia was a threat to, it was a spoof of everything. it made no sense. Like pretty much what I just said made no sense. It made no sense. He was talking about shipping jobs offshore and how Kravac would ship jobs off to Malaysia when Kravac hadn't, to my knowledge, taken a vote on anything that would ship jobs anywhere. And I think there was just this, my God, the man's gone off his rocker. You know, maybe he is getting too old. Maybe he has been, drinking the tea inside the Beltway. So I think that's part of that was part of it. As far as his strength, on transportation issues, yeah, he was a force. Will Kravac be a force? No way. Will this? Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of folks who are big rail fans who would love nothing to see a great choo-choo train go from Chicago to Minneapolis to Duluth. I don't know, but that's what they want, and they're probably going to get a less of a shot of doing it that way. But I don't know that is going to be necessarily the way that his legacy ends up anyway over Stars. I mean, it's just going to be, he brought projects, he brought pork to the area. Look, I worked in Duluth, I know the area. He brought a lot of stuff there that kind of went nowhere because it's a great big county with a lot of stuff that doesn't have a lot of kind of tangible results for people other than it does tend to be make work situations. So, but he had those people there, they could have voted for him, and even those people said no. So somebody wanted him out, somebody wanted to change. And of course, the rest of the wave of the nation, I agree with Eric, went along with it.
Yeah, I still have trouble believing he lost. The question was, what might Tom Horner do in the future? Al's telling us that that's the last question, so the rest is just to give you that warning. And I have not given any thought to that question. Is there some reason he wouldn't go back to his firm?
Yes, I think he has severed ties with the firm.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's going to happen. But more speculating on what Tom individually is going to do is going to be more what Tom's presence may or may not do to the Republican Party. I mean, one of the things I think the Republican Party got a pretty good scare out of what Tom was doing. I don't think they've ever been threatened as forcefully as from the middle as they were with Tom, even though they'll point to that 12% vote and say, you see, it's just what any other independent candidate gets. But Tom got something rolling here. He got every endorsement in the state. He got political leaders and former elected officials, to back him 10-1 over the Republicans. I'd like to think that it will give the party a little kick in the pants, and they'll look next time to cast that net a little bit wider, a little bit broader. And if you do talk to some people in the party, you'll sense that they got that message.
Yeah, well, the Republican Party has changed from Arnie Carlson days to Tom Emmer days, and the party base wants people who have the complete conservative package, and the swing voter, of course, is much more likely to be attracted to moderates, and it's a problem for them. And Horner put it squarely on the table.
And Horner's moderation cost them the election. This is you can say this much. He took Olmsted County, and a Republican has to win Olmsted County big, enormously. And Emmer only won Olmsted County by 8 points. Pawlenty won it by 17. And quite frankly, any Republican should win it by 20 down there. And that was the difference in the election. If Emmer had won Olmsted County by even 17 points compared to what he did run there, he'd be the undisputed. It maybe be a recount, but he'd be on top now.
Yeah, and a big factor in Olmsted County was the healthcare, the rhetoric about the healthcare bill, and the fact that Emmer was the one of the three candidates that wasn't going to opt into the plan. And Olmsted County is Mayo Clinic, and there's a lot of people who had a big stake in that. And I think that on a micro level is also a big.
In a land of gentle Republicans.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the future of those gentle Republicans is up for grabs, and it's an interesting question. They broke with the party this time, and the number of prominent former Republican moderates who endorsed Horner was impressive and pissed the hell out of Tony Sackler. Thanks, guys.